The best of enemies. What a movie that is hard to make, like, really good in 2019. I really wanted to like this movie, and like Henson and Rockwell do like pretty good performances, particularly just Henson. Rockwell's just doing his thing, you know. He's playing the same kind of character that I have seen him in the past already. The real problem with this movie is that it's supposed to be about like Ann Atwater, right? And C.P. Ellis, I think his name is, right? But it's mostly just about Rockwell's character. It's mostly just about the former Klan leader, which is, I suppose, an interesting story in and of itself. I don't know, like, I don't know anything about, like, the real life situation that happened. I'm going to talk about it mostly in terms of a movie and not judge the real life stuff because I don't know what happened. I don't know how true the movie is to fact. But the problem with the movie, really, I think that it comes down to is the fact that it just spends way too much time with Ellis and very little time with Ann Atwater, which sucks because I would love to see a fuller role, because she's like ostensibly like supposed to be the star of the movie with Rockwell, right? But like I feel like they don't have even levels of, they might have even levels of screen time, but they don't have even levels of character development and care from the story's point of view, which I understand why in multiple ways. I think the movie is trying to make us like Ellis's character and root for him, which in its own way is kind of like they really trying to make us care about this racist man before he's not racist, which I don't really care to do. I mean, I understand why they need to make us like him, but if you know what the movie's about and you go into it, I already know that CPL's character is going to become probably less racist because Ellis and Atwater were friends, right? So he can't be president of the Klan for like the whole rest of his life. That wouldn't have worked out. I don't care that much about him. I don't want to. We're inside of his house all the time, and I think we're inside of Ann Atwater's house once when Ellis's wife goes to thank her for doing something nice, and I think that's the only time we ever see the inside of her house. I think we see it outside once in the beginning of the film when she like sends her two daughters off, so that it's established that yes, she has two daughters, and they established through a line of dialogue earlier on, like in the first 5 minutes of the movie, that she's a single mother. So she doesn't have a husband, or I assume date anyone, because it's never mentioned. She's never a romantic character, nothing at all. She's loud, pushy, angry, and that's her character establishment. C.P. Ellis is, you know, he's a working class man. He didn't feel like he belonged anywhere until the Klan came along and gave him this card, and he cried, even though, you know, men aren't supposed to cry. And he has a wife and 4 children. One of them is disabled. He's in the psychiatric hospital and lives there, and oh, he just cares about his son so much. He goes there like every morning to feed his son pancakes, and I mean, it just goes like on and on. Like, I have all this character information about Ellis. I don't really know anything about Ann Atwater, which is, I think that's really the crux of the movie. They're trying to make you feel for Ellis because he's like the racist character, and like his like bad character trait is that, well, he's racist, but he's such a nice guy, and like that's it. And Atwater's like negative characteristics are like, oh, you know, she's pushy, she's a bit rude, she's kind of abrasive, she doesn't listen to anybody else, and it's like, I don't really care. It's entirely understandable why she would be the way she is. So she's dealing with a bunch of racist pricks, so everything she does is like justified. Maybe that's why the movie like didn't care to humanize her. I don't know. The other thing about the movie is that like I understand why it does this thing. It tries to humanize Ellis in general, but also I guess in like kind of a retrospective of like, because like, so the reason that young white men join racist organizations, or like speaking in like 2019 like identitarian organizations and like alt-right groups and stuff like that, is because they're lonely, they feel like outcasts, they might have depression or anxiety, they might be lower class or have some other issue unrelated to their race that makes them think, well, I'm not getting what is promised to me, um, not as a white man, but like as like, oh, like everyone is supposed to have this and I don't have it, and someone comes along and says, well, hey, you know, I think your problem might be black people, and then the angry white man is like, genius. They tumble into it further and further unless they're pulled out of it. And that is certainly a narrative, and that's not what all who are racist is. That's the reason they're racist. That's not at all what I'm saying. But that is a narrative for some people, particularly people who are able to pull back out of it. It might just be that people who, you know, those are the people that we can change. But it establishes basically that character for Ellis. He's working class. You know, he doesn't have money to pay the bills. He can't believe that he's president of his local clan because, you know, he just runs a gas station. He's never been president of anything in his life. Is that really the narrative that we like care about in 2019? Like, and I also think that it's kind of dangerous to like act like that is like, if you're just super nice to racists, then they'll change. That's not reality. And it might have happened in that one specific instance where letting the racist white guy air out his grievances and say all this shit uh, led him to change his mind. But that's just not how it actually works, especially not in 2019. Like, you know, the movie really pushes, I think probably historically, on this idea of like, oh, you have to listen to both sides, you have to let everybody speak, you have to just listen, Ann Atwater. If like a current black activist and like Richard Spencer had a charrette, like Richard Spencer wouldn't change his mind because, oh wow, like a black woman did something really nice for me. Guess I'm gonna stop being a fucking racist. That's just not how it works in most cases. Giving racist people a platform to speak on, literally like letting them say the N-word over and over and over again, and display Klan materials and talk about how, oh, black people are inferior, we don't want them in our schools. Like, that's not helpful to any conversation, because letting both sides speak as if segregation and black people are inferior, I don't want them anywhere near me or my children. Like, racism and anti-racism are not on the same field. They're just not. Like, one of them is basically a neutral idea, like maybe we shouldn't be racist, and the other idea is bad. It's bad because you shouldn't be racist. That's probably my biggest thing with the movie, is it just is like, hey, both sides deserve to speak, and no they don't. No they don't. And the last thing probably is just that, is circling back to Anna Atwater not really having too much of a character. We don't get a lot of, I guess, vulnerability from Atwater's character. She really feels like a strong black woman who doesn't need no man, like, character trope almost. She literally doesn't have a husband. Like, we just don't get any like vulnerability aside from maybe 2 or 3 scenes. The one scene in particular I'm thinking of, she confronts some young black men for like, they're like tearing down Klan stuff at the charrette. She like is angry at them. She's like, you have to read this stuff, you have to know what they're doing. Which was one interesting thing that I did kind of appreciate from the movie. Her character talks about, they're giving us their materials. We can know them better by reading this stuff, and they don't know us at all, because like, they really don't. But overall, like, her character doesn't get a lot to do. Like, she helps Ellis's son get moved to a different room. We assume that she uses her like pushiness and maybe her like community pull. She might even have paid for it. I have no idea because the movie isn't super interested in how she does it. It's just interested in how Ellis reacts to it. Of course. Because it's all about how Ellis reacts to things. And she, I guess she learns to listen a little. She gets to do things, but then it doesn't feel like we have resolution for her. She gets very angry at one of the charrette meetings early on, and she calls the guy who's leading the charrettes, whose name I don't remember because I guess he just really wasn't that important in the movie. She calls him like an Uncle Tom, or implies that he's like an Uncle Tom character. And then I don't remember how that's resolved. I think it just we just move on. We see Ellis for a couple scenes and then we're back to the charrette, and it doesn't really matter what she said to him. I don't want to say I don't sympathize with her because on principle I do, but her character doesn't have a lot to work with, so I don't have a lot to work with when I think about that character. Whereas on the other hand, they've given me plenty to think about with C.P. Ellis. And one of the last things that just popped into my head while I was thinking about the charrettes is just that the movie also, it plays with blonde white ladies. They just weren't as racist as men. So many like white savior movies, which this movie essentially is, the white ladies are just, oh, they're just never as racist. Like, they might be a little bit racist, but nowhere near as racist as the men. Even Ellis's wife is never displayed as racist. She's, even from the very beginning, she's slightly challenging her husband on things until at the very end when he like rips up his clan card, she and her daughter are like, so like they're magically not racist. Amazing. And then the only other like white lady character, she's on the charrette board and she has to be threatened to not vote for integration because she's just so nice and white and not racist. It's just so annoying, that trope, because people who look like me are just as capable of being violently racist. And I was thinking, well, at least this doesn't have a white savior narrative. And then I was like, you know what, though? It does. At the end of the movie, the charrette, the voting, literally comes down to Ellis. He's the last person to vote on the last thing, which is basically overall desegregation. They need one more vote, and CP is the last guy, and you're like, oh my god, is he gonna do it? But of course, he rips up his clan card and he votes for desegregation. He literally saves the day. He literally, it literally all comes down to him and he saves the day. He is the piece in the game board that like wins the game overall. The other characters just don't matter as much. Black characters, their work is kind of, it's not like disregarded, but it's minimized in a way that is just doesn't look good. Sorry, Robin. The movie is fine. It's fine. You can go see it if you want. It doesn't matter. We have one every year, you know? I don't think this one's gonna be Oscar bait. It's too, you know, wrong season for that, but who knows? I don't know. That's the best of Frenemies. I don't know. Sometimes I just think that, like, maybe white people should just stop writing the N-word into movies. You know, like, I get it. They're racist. I already know they're racist. You don't need to make them say the N-word 9 times. It's fine.